Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Abez Show with me, your host, Abe. Today, I have a very special panel where we'll be talking about investors and startups. Please help me welcome Hisham, Kalsoum, Khaldoon, and Walid. Let's start with Kalsoum, as ladies first. Please explain and please tell the audience more about you and your firm, please.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Abe. My name is Kalsoum Lakhani, and I am the co-founder and general partner of Abez Ventures. We are an early stage venture capital fund focused on Pakistan, though obviously there's application to the region as a whole. I've been a player in the Pakistan startup ecosystem for over a decade now. I was a founder of a company that is a sister entity to our fund called Invest to Innovate that's been a supporter, enabler of that ecosystem for some time, though we just opened the doors to our fund in 2019.
Amazing, amazing. I think Pakistan is like on fire, especially the last while, where you guys are seeing a lot of money coming in, and it is a huge market. And I'm very glad that we're seeing a lot of investments and actually the whole ecosystem really moving up.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Hisham, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Abe. My name is Hisham Qasim, managing partner of Qasim Legal, law firm specializing in MENA cross-border transactions. We work with mostly startups and venture capital funds. Thank you.
Amazing, Hisham. I know you've helped a lot of our startups, and I know you've been behind a lot of our startups, even a startup bootcamp. So and we go way back as well. So thank you for that. Walid, I think it's your turn.
Hi, Abe. Thanks for having me. Walid Faza, I'm a partner and chief operating officer of MSA Capital. MSA Capital has headquarters in Beijing, $1.5 billion of assets under management. We are investing in multi-stage sort of tech companies. This is MSA's fifth fund, and it's the first outside of mainland China. And happy to be here.
Always good to see you and always good to talk to you. Thank you, Walid. And last but not least, our sole founder on this panel, Khaldoon. Khaldoon, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Abe, for having me. My name is Khaldoon Bouchnaq. I'm the co-founder of Alma Health. Alma Health is a digital healthcare company on a mission to transform the lives of millions of people with chronic conditions through technology. We are live in Abu Dhabi, and it's a pleasure to be on this show. Thank you for having me.
Always good to have you. Always good to have you. And by the way, we have to state that my brother is the co-founder and partner for Khaldoon. So, but ironically, it's the first time we meet. So
yeah,
face to face. So. Okay, so let's start this panel by asking the very good questions to our investors. So what made you invest in this area and why MENA? I'll leave it up for whoever wants to jump in first.
Maybe I'll take an initial stab at it. I've been in the VC space for the past 11 years, starting in MENA, started with Fadi Randour, MENA Venture Investments, and Wamda Capital. And the idea of investing in tech 11 years ago in the MENA region was a little bit weird, to say the least. It's like, how are you spending your time and how are you dedicating your life? Well, I'm going to invest in technology in the Middle East. Are you sure that that's what you want to do? And the aha moment came when Yahoo bought Maktoob for the tone of $160 million. And it was finally an embryo where you can build something of value in the region and an international agglomerate can actually come and acquire it. And there was an aha moment where it was just like, wait, hold on. This is something new. There's actually a path to build something. Technology is kind of breaking the barriers and making things simple for companies to scale faster. And so it was kind of a litmus test to say, actually, this does work. And then there's been a slew of exits that happened after that. Yemek Sepeti, Delivery Hero, Sue, Amazon, Careem, Uber, and the story continues. So from the way my vantage point is that the opportunity was always there. It was just taking a matter of time until the ecosystem was developed enough to then actually mature. And I think we're in the maturing phase. So that's my background. And then it was a conscious decision to shift from a regional VC and get an international VC to come and start looking at the space so that we can get the knowledge, we can get the playbooks, we can get the technology, we can get the know-how of how other jurisdictions and other ecosystems are scaling, and how can we inject some of that know-how into the Middle East so that we can become a global player. And I think with the likes of Sequoia coming in, much more global VCs kind of sniffing around now and looking into it, I think it's very exciting. So MSA came into the space 2 years ago, again, after sort of the Uber Careem acquisition, because MSA is investor in Didi, and Didi invested in Careem, and it was just, we're also investors in Uber. And it was just a moment where it's like, okay, where is there a geography left on the planet where we can actually go and start investing and scaling these companies much faster? And I don't think there's a lot of places left. And the Middle East and North Africa and Africa is definitely a prize to be won. And I think that's why MSA is here, and that's why we're really excited about it.
Jasmine?
Sure. So I can speak about Pakistan, but then also relate it to MENA as well, just my lens on it. So, I mean, to everything that Walid just said, I mean, I've been part of the development of what's been happening in Pakistan for a decade now. And so everything was kind of chugging and moving slowly, and everything all of a sudden, as you were mentioning, Abe, it was just like everything just kind of turned over and became really large, really fast. And Pakistan is, the fifth largest country in the world, right? Population wise itself. So there's a huge addressable market. We're going to be the third largest middle class after India and China in the next 5 years. Like, digitization is becoming very, very big right now. Big youth population. So a lot of the same stats that we're seeing in MENA as well. And so Pakistan kind of being where it is, where the price is still relatively cheap compared to some other emerging markets, kind of makes it really ripe for VC investment right now. And I think there's a lot of application when we think about MENA and Pakistan. So we're seeing a lot of MENA companies enter Pakistan. So obviously Noon Academy on the edtech side, Abez is entering Pakistan right now. Obviously Swivel from Egypt entered Pakistan a while ago. And so we're seeing a lot of outside into that. And right now with Retailo and the B2B e-commerce side, we're seeing Retailo operate both in Saudi as well as in Pakistan. So I think there's a huge opportunity to think about how those borders are kind of shifting, and how a lot of MENA funds are kind of becoming MENAP funds and adding Pakistan to it, just because of where we are right now and where we're poised for. And so as a fund operating in Pakistan, for me, it's actually quite interesting and exciting to see also the external application of what's happening in Pakistan and how we can actually relate it elsewhere. I'm a huge geek on cities and how cities relate to each other. And I think Cairo and Karachi, as an example, have a huge amount of similarities in terms of how they operate, the people, the dynamics of those cities. And so I think there's, if we see a startup operating in Karachi really, really well, there's no reason why it couldn't also work in a Cairo or work in another city in the MENA region too. So yeah, really exciting times. And I think the opportunity to kind of do a lot more crossover is really interesting.
And okay, so before we jump onto the startup perspective, which I would like Khaldoon to also add to this, but because I've been an entrepreneur for 15 years of my life, and then the last 3 years I flipped on the investor side. And so what do you think was, I'm asking the investors, what do you think was the pivotal point where this shift from international money coming into this region happened exactly? You know what I mean? Like, I know we're recording this in August, and I know last month we had 2 unicorns coming out of MENA, but before that, I think we had 3 others over the last span, or possibly 2 in the last year or so. But what was the pivotal moment for the investors to start looking at this area? I know Walid mentioned that it was one of the last areas for the VCs to look at, major, at least populated areas. But what do you think? Why do you think that happened?
I mean, I think there's a lot of data points to talk about. I think there has been an awakening in terms of governments waking up and saying, actually investing in youth makes sense, having sovereign funds, and really, the Middle East is kind of seen globally as oil-rich countries. They have a lot of cash, but they invest outside. And then there came this moment, and arguably we can talk about the Arab Spring. Arguably we can talk about some of the exits that happened, but governments, local governments, and high net worth individuals, in terms of angel groups, started to look internally and started to say, we have a youth bulge, we have a population problem. How is this going to be solved? We can't just rely on rentier states and governments to take care of this. It's getting out of control. Oh, look, there is this thing where you can actually start investing in your own population and the ecosystem. And they had to actually be patient enough to see how this is going to provide liquidity and provide impact. Because initially it was, okay, technology, is this really going to work? What do you mean, websites? Like, that's not going to change the world. And then it became mobile phones, and then it became penetration rates, and then it became 4G and 5G, and then all of a sudden an awakening really took place that I feel was a pivotal moment, at least from a governmental perspective, on a political landscape. All of these different plate tectonics have to really converge for there to be an aha moment that says, yes, this is an asset class that makes sense. It's happened in other places. It's happening in poor countries. It's happening in rich countries. Why can't it happen here? We've got the connectivity now. We've got the youth. And we had to really overcome this whole idea of 22 countries and borders and boundaries. And it was stifling development, and it was stifling trade. And all of a sudden you have a layer of technology that's coming in, and it's like, whoa, this actually works. So, I mean, for me, it was that money flowing back in to the region, from the region, and then liquidity, which means exits. Finally, we saw potential where angel investors and VCs that were early on started to see returns. And I think when you have that money coming in, the engine then really starts running. So, arguably, I think the Kareem story was just a huge, nuclear kind of wake-up call for everybody, saying, oh my goodness, this is not, small chump change of helping some kids. This is a multi-billion-dollar deal. And I think that was a huge wake-up call.
Yeah, and I think that what happened as a result of the Kareem exit, right, in terms of the Kareem Mafia, how many people have gone on to launch companies across the region, including in Pakistan, right? And those are people that it's been borderless for some time. They've been operators across the region. So they've also seen the opportunity of how easy it is to scale in different places and the similarities that exist. And I think that's really interesting. In Pakistan specifically, startups in Pakistan since 2015 to present day have raised over $424 million in funding, but half of that has happened just this year. And so that is insane in terms of when you think about the inflection point that's going on right now. I mean, the Prime Minister of Pakistan just tweeted about Airlift raising $85 million in their Series B round, right? Which obviously brought in a lot of international VC money. And so obviously international VCs waking up and paying attention, but to Waleed's point about MENA is happening in Pakistan as well. There's a lot of levers that move at the same time. And one of the biggest things that I've always been a big vocal critic of is that the regulatory barriers in Pakistan have been very high for startups to actually succeed. And one of the things that has changed is we've had a very progressive state bank, as well as a progressive Securities and Exchange Commission commissioner over the last year that have created regulatory changes that have allowed startup founders to set up holding companies outside. Most of them are setting up actually in Dubai and ADGM, like all these places. And that's allowing international money to come in a lot more easily, whereas people probably had a lot of risk aversion in putting money directly into the country, not knowing how to get it out of the country. And so I think that in itself is super interesting, because that has unlocked a lot. Those regulatory changes has also unlocked the fintech sector, right? So when we look at the quantum of deals in Pakistan this year, it's actually equal to what's been happening in e-commerce, and that did not happen before, right? 40% of the money that's been raised by the fintech sector since 2015 has happened just in 2021 because of the regulatory changes. So as much as we talk about things that need to be grassroots and ground up, so much has to happen also from top down. And I think that converging at the same time, even though Pakistan hasn't had exits the way that MENA does, I think as things are the borders are coming down and a lot of MENA funds are investing in Pakistan as well. I think people are starting to see that exits will come, right? Especially as these things start to move, and we're seeing the velocity of that activity increase at a pace that I've never personally seen before, not even in other emerging markets. So it's a really exciting time for the whole region.
Yeah, amazing.
I want to chime in. I just don't want to give false kind of, I think there's a lot of ingredients that are creating this perfect storm, but also for the listeners of the podcast, we're not there yet. I mean, kudos to the entrepreneurs that have been and continuously are jumping hurdles on a regulatory basis, on on so many different levels, on payment gateways, on last mile delivery. I mean, there's so much pain that is still there that needs to be overcome, which is great, because then you have a lot of opportunities to do that. But and maybe Hisham can talk to this, but I mean, the entrepreneurs had to go and figure out ways to register companies that were investor friendly, so that they're able to work in jurisdictions that are sticky. Kalsoom was saying, you put your money in a country, what the hell do you do with it? We don't even know, where it goes if you start investing in Pakistan or Egypt or Saudi or where else. And I think that was a huge, leap of faith that both investors and entrepreneurs took to be able to operate legally, yet outside of the norms, just to be able to start scaling in the region. And I think that was very pivotal to be able to get technology companies to start working in the region.
And I agree with you, and I will come to Hisham and speak about this specific issue, because I know legal is one of the, I would say, uncharted territory in legal technology, because even as an entrepreneur, we always ignored legal to the end, and then honestly, I paid for it dearly a couple of times, but that's something that I'll get back to. But I really want to hear now Khaldoon's perspective on. We've heard from the investment side, and I want to know from the startup side, like, how easy was it for you to raise money from outside of MENA, as you guys are a UAE company? Like, was it easy? Like, was it easier? Because I can tell you, in 2006, when I first raised for my first company in Jordan, nobody was even looking at us. You know what I mean? You had to be in Jordan. Funds came from Jordan. There was nothing called. Nobody would, like, if you even said the word Delaware or BVI or whatever. No, people would laugh at you, saying, what is going on?" So tell me your experience with talking to investors from outside this region, that you are a UAE company.
Yeah, absolutely. So raising capital is not an easy thing to do, especially from an international VC. And I think both Walid and Kalsoom talked about the amazing opportunities in the region. But to Walid's point, the region continues to be highly fragmented. The regulatory part is very difficult to navigate. There's still a lot of pain points in our journey as entrepreneurs, but that doesn't mean that we give up. That means we continue to attack these challenges one at a time. And because of the liquidity events that happened in the region, whether it's Kareem or Swivel most recently, the international VCs believe that there's an opportunity in the region. And I think that's very, very important. So to your point, Abe, maybe 5-6 years ago, this part of the world wasn't ripe for investments for an international VC. But finally, the VCs are paying attention to this part of the world due to the success story that have come out of the region. So let me talk about my experience with Alma Health. I am a proud member of the Korean Mafia, which obviously struck a chord with Hambro Perks, which was the VC firm that led our round. Hambro Perks was the first international VC to register in ADGM, and we were the first investment that they had led in the region. And I believe what happened with Alma Health is that we launched the company at the right time in the middle of the pandemic. We want to build a future where digital services or digital healthcare services are offered first to a patient with a chronic condition. So we were at the right time. We came in at the right time. Tariq is a great co-founder with a great background in technology. So the quality of the co-founders, I believe, struck a chord with the VC. And we know how to navigate the regulatory environment in Abu Dhabi, the first city that we launched. So I believe those three things gave Hamburg Perks the core belief that this is a company that we could scale, and they made the investment in Alma Health. So it's a combination of things. Of course, the journey is still long. We still have a lot of challenges to tackle, but I believe the ingredients for the recipe are available.
Oh, good to hear. Good to hear. It's definitely something in, people talk about the ex-Kareem Mafia and the ex-Talabat, and people forget the ex-Dubizzle people, which myself and my brother was a part of, but we never really talked. This was not like fashionably, people put on LinkedIn, but you know what? That's what you need. You need to create more of those people that would obviously create more jobs, because like I'm a very high impact entrepreneur where I believe in creating jobs and stuff like that. And not only innovation comes with it, and obviously I always say that money comes with the result of what you're doing, right, and not the purpose of. But so let's go back to the regulatory issue and the legal issues, and I want to talk to Hisham about this topic because this is still a very big unknown for a lot of the founders. Not so much investors, but investors are learning as well, because the regulatory scene, you guys have been mentioning ADGM, and I've mentioned other regulatories outside of MENA, because in the beginning, 5 years ago, if you wanted to go anywhere, everybody tells you BVI, you know what I mean, or Delaware, or something like that. But tell us how did the regulators and how did actual governments, like Waleed mentioned something very I think was bang on. I think when government got involved, especially that this whole region is very, very youthful, and they wanted to say how can they create jobs, and they had to really loosen up and rethink the ways, a lot of the ways companies did stuff, especially in the financial and the fintech, logistics, and obviously with Kareem coming up, logistics I think is going to be one of the hottest, if not the hottest, verticals in MENA, as we lack infrastructure, right? So Hisham, the floor is yours. Tell me more about what do you think the governments and the whole legal scene is going to be looking like?
Okay, thank you. So unfortunately, most of the Middle Eastern governments have not done much to attract foreign VCs. We're talking about foreign VCs looking at startups in Egypt, Saudi, UAE, or Pakistan. They are usually comfortable investing in a handful of jurisdictions. ADGM is one of them, BVI, Cayman, Holland, US. So our job as lawyers is to set these companies up in a way where it's attractive for foreign VCs. It's a jurisdiction that they know and that they're used to, and they know exactly what they're getting into. Very few VCs will invest directly into a Jordanian company or an Egyptian or a Pakistani just because they don't know. And our laws here, unfortunately, don't allow for the kind of rights that VCs want, like board seats, reserved matters. There's a whole list of things. Those aren't usually available locally. So we have to go to these other jurisdictions. In terms of licensing, I know we've had a lot of experience with Waleed and Khaldoon, less so with Kalsoom, but we'll hit walls where we need to do something locally and simply not, it's usually possible, but it's practically impossible. It either takes too long or costs too much. So we try to find like a workaround, an easy solution that we sort of try to get to the result without it taking 6 months and costing like half the investment. So that's sort of what we specialize in, is in loophole mining, if you want to call it that. But yeah, I think it's sort of being able to bridge the foreign investors' expectations with the legal structure in the Middle East, it's going to take a bit of time, but I think we are getting there. I don't know if that answered your question.
It did, and you know what? Like because I run a program and we have a fund, and we have over 100 companies in our between our funds, right? And we have what I've been seeing in the last 3 years is two major problems. Investors are not aware of the laws, and even they're not aware of the type of mechanisms people can invest in. Like when you tell them a convertible note or a safe note, your typical angel investor doesn't understand that. No, he wants a shareholders agreement, and I'm like, no, that's going to cost probably, especially when you're talking about an angel investment of $50,000 or something like that, or even 25. The 25, it's going to cost like half of that just to create a shareholders agreement, right? So people don't get that, and I think that and I we used to do something called the Angels Boot Camp, where we would train angels to be angels, because a lot of people are sitting on, they want to invest in a lot of the companies, but do not understand the mechanism or the vehicles that they can look into, right? So we had to go through a 3-day workshop with these angels to say, this is a good investment, this is not a good investment, this is the type of investment, this is what you're looking for, this is what you can ask for, and this is stuff that you can't ask for, because we had a lot of angel investors say, I'll give you 50K, but I want 50% of the company. You just killed this company, right? So, and so on and so on and so on. And this is happening across all of MENA. And I know I'm seeing the founders laughing, because I know all of us have heard these stories. And I personally have, when we raised $1 million in 2006 for Crystal, it was a lot of that saying, I'll give you whatever and give me 50%. And I'm like, no, you know what I'm saying? And that's one thing. And I think the number two is I think, as you said, like, in order to attract more money from outside, because we do need foreign money and we need foreign investment money, not because of the money also, but it also comes with what Waleed mentioned earlier, comes with expertise, comes with playbooks, what to invest in and what didn't, you know what I mean? Like, before even joining Startup Bootcamp, I never knew that investors looked at how many co-founders are there. You know what I mean? Like, they say, oh, this strong founder, done. But our number rule in Startup Bootcamp saying never invest in single founders. You know what I mean? They have to be a minimum 2 to 3 people. And going through the cycle myself of me being an entrepreneur, I'd never invest in one founder anyway, because people get distracted and all that good stuff. So that's something that is definitely needed. Okay, so let's talk about. So how do you think? And this question is for anybody on this panel. How do you think we can attract more foreign money? You know what I mean? And then I'll talk about what is missing in MENA and Pakistan that's coming in. So who would like to tackle that first?
Maybe I'll take a small stab at it. One of the reasons why I chose MSA was to build a bridge between what's happening between China and what's happening in the Middle East. And the idea there is, how can we increase the velocity of M&A activity in the region? Because, prior to what's happening now, it was kind of like you wait 7 to 8 to 9 years for, an exit to happen. And that doesn't really create an ecosystem. And there needed to be much more velocity and much more liquidity into the whole ecosystem, so that it makes sense for angels to put in money and take the risk and understand that they're going to get money back. Same thing at the VC level, because when I was fundraising 3-4 years ago, the major question that was asked is, okay, where are the exits going to come from? We haven't had a company from the region IPO. Acquisitions are happening, once a decade. So, I mean, how are we going to get our money back? As fantastic as of a picture that you're painting for me, we need those exits. I think there needs to be a lot more consolidation in place. I think today we see a company that is operating in the Levant. There's another one operating in Dubai that's very similar. There's another one in Egypt that's operating very similar, maybe another one in Saudi. And I think at one point in time, being able to navigate the region and being able to take away all of this fragmentation of 22 countries and unify it together is really what creates a lot of value for international companies to come in. And even at that level, you can potentially have significant IPOs that make sense. So for me, it's a lot of M&A and a lot of consolidation that has to play. And then I think there's a lot more international money that's going to come in and some big boys that are going to come in. So again, at the end of the day, for VCs, it's money. It's risk and return, and you need to make sure that we'll take the risk if there's a return. Prove to us that that's the case, and the money will come in. And I think now we're finally in a process where we're churning and we're showing the world that actually there are returns that are coming from this jurisdiction, from this ecosystem, and we need to expand it. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Okay. Kalsoum, you want to take a hit out?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now what's interesting is that we have so much international funds coming into the country right now. Like every deal that I've been in, it's at least like 4 to 1 at this point, of 4 international to 1 local. And typically it'll be maybe only 1 local that'll get into the deal because that's what our value is. So it's almost like an interesting conundrum right now of just so much international money that's on the table. Not a bad thing. And actually what I always tell founders, and like the fact that money's on the table right now, take it, because with the geopolitical things that happen, especially right now with things that are happening around us in Afghanistan, like I think it's important for us to be able to capitalize on what's going on right now. I think what's also interesting though, to what's been happening is that a lot of that money is going towards very specific sectors. So we're seeing a lot of money flow to e-commerce and to fintech right now. Actually, the majority of money is pretty much all going to those 2 sectors. And I think what's interesting is that we're seeing, this fast follower model of people investing in models that they understand. So even if they have country risk with Pakistan, they're investing in models that they may have done in other markets around us. And so that allows them to maybe come into a deal that they may not have, Pakistan might not be part of their mandate, but it's much more something that like lowers their risk a little bit in terms of at least psychologically of coming into the market. And then once they come in, then they start to see just the overall potential and then use that as a leverage point. So even a lot of the international funds that are in the deals that I'm in are now saying to me like, okay, wow, this is really cool. What else do you have? Right? Like, let's look at other deals that are coming up. And so I see it as a real hook to bring other people in. And a friend of mine said this about Southeast Asia, and I think this is really true. I think that there really needs to be, and we have a number of local VCs in Pakistan, but the local VC ecosystem, generally there's a push and pull right now. So the local VC ecosystem has been professionalized by all of these international funds coming in. So as competition has heated up, it's forced all of us to step up our game in terms of the value that we provide after the deal is done. When we're saying we're founder friendly, are we actually founder friendly? What does that mean? Our portfolio companies all speak to each other. So that's really important in terms of reputation in the market. And so that I think will also just generally improve the overall value of that, because I think for international funds coming in, having a strong local VC ecosystem will really help them mitigate the risk as those companies are looking to grow. We understand the market better than international VCs do, and especially in markets like in MENA and in Pakistan, these are such high friction places, right? So you need local investors that can actually know how to navigate things that come up that even might be regulatory related, right? And we have like the right context to get things done. And so I think that's also going to play a very strong role in helping to reinforce the international money that's coming in and make it more sustainable and have more longevity, I hope, in the medium term.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think that's something that I know you guys have mentioned many, many times about the MENA. The MENA is 20 plus market. And if we're adding Pakistan and Iran and Turkey, that's even bigger. So people don't especially when I talk to a lot of the American investors or people from Southeast Asia, they keep saying, oh, MENA's 400, 500 million people. I'm like, well, it's still 20 countries, 20 regulators and all that good stuff. I wish they can implement something like passport services, like what Singapore has with the 11 other nations. If you have a license in Singapore, you can operate other places. But that's as well, I think that's something that the government needs to work in to, we're going to leave that there. But Hisham, Khaldoon, please feel free to add your 2 cents as well.
Yeah, if I may add, from the entrepreneur's point of view, it's very important to attract international capital. as a competitive advantage for the company. So when we invited Hamburg Perks to participate in our cap table, we invited them because they had invested in a similar company in Europe and had exited that business. So it's very important for us to bring a VC that had walked the walk with one of their portfolio companies and have seen that company grow from a seed company all the way to an exit to a major healthcare player. Of course, Hamburg Perks has a number of portfolio companies that went public, that SPACed. So that obviously gives us that steep learning curve early on to prepare the company from the get-go for, inshallah, a major exit. So it's really important to have international VC on your cap table, as much as it's important to have local VCs on your cap table as well, to de-risk all the local, on-the-ground challenges that you have to deal with as a company. So I think that combination is very important.
Yeah, I 100% agree. 100% agree. Sham, would you like to add anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I think for international VCs coming into the region, they either do what MSA or I2I is doing, and they hire someone like Walid or Kalsoom on the ground, or they can piggyback and co-invest with people, local VCs. The local VCs know the market better, like Kalsoom said. And then they can always just co-invest alongside and then sort of offload the local part onto the local VC, the local due diligence, I mean. But you mentioned something about everyone, about your angel investors not really knowing what the standard terms are. And I think one of the things we're lacking here is like a venture capital association, standard setting. I know we have one or maybe two, which is another problem in the Middle East. Everyone has their own standard setting institution and no one follows anyone else. But it would be great if most of the VCs in the region got together and said, these are the standards we want. We don't necessarily need to follow US, UK. We can use them as a model, but sort of modify it for our part of the world. And then I think that may give more comfort to international VCs that at least there's a minimum standard and everyone's expectations have been set. I don't know what the other panelists think of that. Maybe I think it'll make everyone's life much easier.
It would, I think it would definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Walid?
Yeah, there's a lot of education that needs to take place all the time. I think this asset class is still unknown for a lot of family offices and for a lot of, PE investors that haven't, kind of looked at VC or kind of, wanted to go down and really understand, technology as it starts to scale. And if they don't, they're missing the boat because it's too late. I mean, these companies are going to start IPOing very soon. And so they're going to sort of skip over them unless they start educating themselves. So everything from angel investors to now, there's so much government money around that there's VCs popping all over the place, but they still don't understand the asset class. So yeah, a lot of education has to go in. And I think standardization and some kind of association that says, look, this is how it's done. These are the standard terms. This is the easy way for you to get into the game if you want to, will make everybody's life a lot easier. Because the last thing you want are some, people that are throwing money and not really understanding and then actually hurting the whole ecosystem. Like the cap table talk that we were talking about, initially when, somebody gives you 25K or 50K and wants 51% of the company. Like that, it just doesn't work. We're not speaking the same language and it's never gonna evolve that way. And I think a lot of people still think that way, especially rich family offices in the Gulf that need to sort of kind of update the way that they think about VC.
Can I just add to that? Because I think I've been trying to understand the psychology behind why people do that. And I think it's really interesting because I think, at least in Pakistan, right? Because family companies, and I'm sure this is the same in the Middle East, but in Pakistan, family companies are so generational, right? There's no such thing as exits really in family companies. Like you own them for generations. So this idea of ownership and this idea of power being very top down are things that really exist in these markets, right? And so to unpack that psychology and I've been speaking to so many of our LPs, our next generation of next generation wealth of these family offices. And it really represents an opportunity of like, how do we actually not only bring them on board, because I think they represent like a new wave of thinking, but also really get to the root of why they feel this way, right? If they've never seen it happen before, how do you actually bring them in as like an audience member by being part of a fund and seeing how this actually works, seeing the trajectory, especially when you haven't really had, at least Pakistan hasn't really had major exits yet. When you don't have major exits, they don't really know when they're going to get their money out, right? So then they do want to take 50%. So I think it really helps in terms of messaging to break it down and go beyond saying like, you know, this is calling it vulture capital, which it is that, but it's actually not really getting to the root of the issue, which is actually saying like, why are they behaving this way and how do we change their thinking around it? So I think it's been really helpful to bring them kind of along for the ride to see it up close, and then have that be the education point as well, beyond the typical things that we also do in terms of educating them about deals and cap tables and dilution and all of the other things that we're supposed to do.
No, it's very well said, actually. And, so other than education, clearly we need to educate, I think we need to educate a lot of the value chain, actually. It's not only the investors, right? So, but what do you think also MENA and Pakistan and this region is missing? Like, I'll give you an example. A lot of the startups, when we talk to, they say access to market. You know what I mean? They say talent. They say funding. And then they say regulations. Those are the four. And we've addressed the regulation on this panel, with a couple of questions. I don't think we've talked about talent, but we've talked about the basics of investors and their investor relationships and their education. So what do you think is still needs work in this region? Now, I'm going to start with Kasum first.
Oh, it's a hard question to start with first, but okay, I'll take a crack at it. So I think, so we're talking about regulation changes that have helped. I think the one, at least, so I'm going to speak from the Pakistan lens, but the one body that is missing, it's our elephant in the room, is the tax regime in Pakistan, which is still not making regulatory changes. And when we think about other governments that have incentivized digitization and pushed digitization in those countries, it's oftentimes been tax incentives that get people that have been off the books to actually come back on, right? And to become part of the formal economy. And especially as so many of these companies that we're seeing are servicing this very large MSME, SME sector, a lot of those issues of why they're not going online is tax related, right? They don't want to get like stuck with these enormous things that are happening. So I would say that the regulatory barriers continue to need to change, and particularly engaging, for us at least, FBR, which is the Board of Revenue, right, is that's what needs to be brought into the room. And then to your point, Abe, about talent, I think that, we have so many companies in Pakistan that are growing really, really fast. And I know, for all of our portfolio companies, like talent is the number one challenge, right? And it's less about like lower level talent that it's relatively easy to train. It's more about that mid tier of what happens when you're building your Series A, like how do we get like good CFOs in the market? How do we get good CTOs in the market, right? I think a lot of people in Pakistan, we tend to think, and actually, Kareem is an example, their back end was all built in Pakistan, right? Right now, that back end for a lot of these companies are servicing Silicon Valley style firms, and it's really expensive to hire that level of talent right now, even locally. And so I think there just needs to be more of not only building good tech talent, but also that mid layer of management that's also needed as these companies are scaling. And obviously, I think with COVID, we've seen the possibility of remote work and not having to hire people just in one place. But I think that's going to continue to be a challenge, and also just generally even soft skills that are related to what you need in terms of that management layer.
Khaldun, I think you have something to say, because you kept.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I couldn't agree more with Kalsoom. You're totally on point. Alma Health is in the growth stage. We're obviously seeking top tier talent in the market, and when I look at comparables in the US and Europe, players in the digital healthcare, and I look at their management, I look at their board of advisors, their corporate board, it's the level of talent is mind-blowing, right? You have people from major healthcare companies joining these healthcare startups. You have people from the FDA, the regulator, joining these high growth startups in the US and in Europe. And I think this is what the region needs. So when I look at Alma Health, that's exactly the dream. Looking for high quality, highly talented, highly focused talent in the healthcare domain. And I think to be able to attract the person that works at the Ministry of Health in Saudi right now, or the doctor that works at a major hospital in the UAE, they want to see more data points. They want to see more major exits in the region to take that leap of faith and join a high growth startup like Alma Health. So talent is definitely top of mind.
And I think just to add to that, because this is something that I've seen throughout, I've struggled with living again in different sides of the Middle East where, even getting certain, anybody that is not a national into the company was almost like, Saudi's going through its revolution, Jordan, it's almost impossible to get a foreign talent in your company, no matter what you try to do. Believe me, I've tried everything. And the thing is, but talent is something big, and I, we have to touch on that point. But COVID, with remote work, I think that kind of not only opened up the talent market to everybody, even I would say gave opportunities for people who never had access to these, jobs now to really, come in and to the competitive workforce. So this is something that I think COVID did change a lot of that. And I still hear major companies, like even monster companies like Microsoft and even Talabat locally, they're saying, you don't need to come into the office till 2022, right? So, and I think more of that, more of that people, especially the startups, will be a bit less. Sorry, they'll be more lean in that offering because you don't need all these fancy offices anymore. But I'm still a believer in office space because it's places where people can come in and share ideas and they can work and stuff like that. But maybe you don't need everybody there under one roof. So that's something else. Walid, would you like to add anything to that?
If somebody asked us what we look for to invest in a company, I would say two things. One is the founder, and two is the total addressable market. So that takes us to founder being talent and where that comes from, and TAM being their ability to scale. And that comes regulations, and that comes like what you said earlier, Abe, which is passporting, something that really allows us to just, get the market going together. I think there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen. I think corporates are in a great position to also really help leverage a lot of the startups and really understand that instead of being disrupted, they can be cooperative and they can actually take on new technologies and have these companies piggyback on top of them so that they can grow together in a symbiotic kind of relationship. And I think that could be possible. I think banks and debt financing has a long way to go in the region. These companies that are scaling and are doing equity rounds, like honestly, the founder doesn't have time to do anything else except fundraising. It's a full-time job. It's insane. And it would be so great if, SME lending and debt financing would be available, because a lot of these, these companies just need an extra bridge round where they don't need to sell their equity or promise equity in the future to get to where they need to go. So I think there's still a lot to be done on the financial side of things. Talent is key, and interesting you say you can't get foreign talent in Jordan. I agree with you, but everybody wants to live in Dubai. That's like an epicenter of something that has really worked. And I think where you get talent is where you get, society and happiness and people really wanting to be part of the culture or part of the ecosystem. It's going to be very difficult unless countries wake up and say, we're going to make this a beautiful living space for families, for kids, for censorship and all of the stuff that we have to kind of, unwind being in an Arab society or being in a Middle Eastern society to be able to attract international talent. I think you're right. COVID and distance, hiring is fine, but we're so culturally sensitive so that these localized, Me Too kind of technologies that we have really need to understand what it's like. So even if you're a developer, you really have to understand the mind frame of your local consumer of the region to be able to build something that is going to be very relevant. So I still think that there is going to be a lot of localization that needs to take place, and an understanding for that cultural flavor.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Listen, like, I know you, Waleed, you and I go way back, and me moving from my own startup, 7 years into it, and then I moved to Dubai and walked into Dubizzle. I remember that day where I met 48 different nationalities that, when you actually ask the question, you had literally 30 different type of ideas because everybody they addressed the problem with what they saw locally in their countries, and seeing that kind of creativity really sparks up the whole conversation. And I think this is where innovation really happens, when you guys said a lot of things about localization. Well, you know what, Dubai is a melting pot. I think something like 90% of the population was born outside of UAE. So when we have all these kind of ideas trying to solve a local problem, that becomes a lot more scalable, and this is where talent really excels. And I saw this a lot. And right now I am acting as chief of people for the company I'm working for, so I deal with talent all the time. And a lot of that, it's amazing. When I left Diviso and I went back to my other company, and it was back in Jordan as well. And when I would ask a question, I would get 99% of the time the same answer from like different departments, right? Because people were not as exposed, they were not as culture super smart people. They knew, they've done the readings, but they haven't experienced it in it. And that's, I think, that's what the Silicon Valley, that's what Dubai brings, that's what London brings, that's what New York City brings. It's that whole different perspective of attracting different talents from all over the world to come in and actually thrive together. So that's something that I think they've done really well. I generally do believe that we do have good talent in Dubai and in MENA. It's getting maybe a bit expensive, but then again, there is there. But comparing to like our, the markets where unicorns are coming out, whether Shenzhen in China or the Valley in New York City, we don't have that many unicorns. Like you guys, Kalsun mentioned something very important. That middle management layer is what's lacking right now. We don't need like top gun CFOs and top gun CTOs, because it's a pyramid. You build talent through a pyramid, right? So and with us producing more unicorns these days, more talent will come out. Those that we talked about. I've been hearing a lot of these people exit, opening up their own venture studios and corporate venture studios and all that good stuff. So that will come in from there as well. So that's I agree with you. I think we're on that path, and talent is always a very sensitive topic in this region. But I think we're slowly beginning to, and there's a lot of actually old, sorry, not old, Middle Eastern / Pakistani talent coming back from the West back into Pakistan and India and MENA, because a lot of action is happening here. I'm going to ask one last question before I ask my signature question for the podcast. I promised you guys. I want to ask a prediction, and I'm going to start with Waleed on this because I know I want to hear what he says. So we're in August right now. Do you think we'll get more unicorns coming out of MENA and Pakistan by the end of the year? And if so, how many?
Interesting.
Mention any names, because I don't want to put you on the spot, but you know what I mean? I will answer this question myself, but I want to hear everybody say something.
My answer is yes, and my answer is 2. Do you want more details?
Yes, if you want to give more details. Would you like to make a friendly wager on
Yeah, happy to do so. I mean, I'm in the business of risk and return, so no. Look, I think the Swivel story and the SPAC and the Rami SPAC and the fact that SPAC is available, I think is going to attract more people, and the fact that it's doable from the region, I think it's going to open people's eyes. I think the other unicorn, got soft bank money, and I think there's appetite and there is, there's a pipeline that's open now. So I think we have a lot more potential to see unicorns. I think there are several companies that are ramping up to get to that point, and I think it's a race. I think we're going to see much more unicorns popping up. So that's my prediction. Thank you.
All right, two is good. It's all right. Let's go to Kalsoum, and then I'll go to Khaldun, and then I'll go to Hisham, and then I'll give you my answer. So Kalsoum, please.
I'll give the Pakistan prediction. I think we will have a unicorn next year. I don't think this year. I mean, we're almost in September, so it's like 3 months left. I do think that we're going to hit 300 million in funding raised by companies this year. So that's another $60 million. And so that's like one more quarter left to do that. And I think that we're going to hit that. And that's a record more than what we've ever done. So that's my prediction for Pakistan.
I think for Pakistan, you guys will get more than one unicorn next year, personally.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think I was being conservative just because I'm pretty positive we're going to have at least 2 to 3, but I think we're definitely going to get one by at least Q1 or Q2 of next year. So
I think the fintech, one of them, there's a couple of them. I'm keeping my eye on them.
Yeah. Do you want to share names?
Maybe after the call. And
okay.
Logistics is also big because you guys have an infrastructure logistical problems to solve. So I think there is quite a lot of companies that are actually addressing that, and I think there's a lot of room for that. So that's something.
Yeah, I think our first unicorn is probably going to be in e-commerce, and I think the second or third will probably be in fintech for sure. So
yeah. So I agree. E-commerce is getting monstrously big in Pakistan. I'm doing Alma Health. Inshallah.
Not this quarter for sure, or the next, but inshallah, either 2022 or 2023, inshallah. But I agree with Walid. I think there's going to be 2 by the end of Q4 2021. And I would love to see more companies that either IPO or get acquired, not just SPAC. I think that would be great for the region.
Cool. Hisham?
I think 1 by the end of the year and 1 right at the beginning of next year. I think the 2, one of them is going to get pushed to the next year. That's my prediction.
Okay.
Prediction / insider knowledge.
No comment. No comment.
So that's super cool.
Can I just say how optimistic this is? I mean, I think if you asked that question a few years ago, it would have been, over the next 5 years, do you think there's going to be a unicorn? So, I mean, what we're talking about now on a quarterly basis is just phenomenal.
I personally think there will be a unicorn a month at the end of the year, personally. Knowing what's happening in the ecosystem, having, again, how you define the unicorn is also, what I mean? A lot of companies are going the SPAC route and the investment rounds. You're hearing a lot of talk from the big investors coming into this region. I think 2, like what Walid said. I think I know the 2 that Walid is referring to, but I would like to be hopeful and have one a month. We did 2 in July, so hopefully that's something that we can, and we do the 2 completely different types in July, one through the direct equity investment and one through a SPAC. So that's something that, the opportunity. I think also we will start seeing a lot of IPO material coming up soon because people are looking into the whole London, New York Stock Exchange, Dubai, and all that good stuff. So that's also a good form of. Okay, so we've been talking for a good hour, and it's been a very engaging conversation. I always ask all my guests this question. It is something like a little curveball I ask everybody. So I would like everybody to give me their answer, and please feel free. Anybody, this time we'll start with Hisham. I ask my panelists, if you had one superpower or a super heroine or a hero you would like to mimic, who would that be, or what would that power be? And if he can do both, that's even better. And I've heard some crazy answers, so please surprise me and add good stuff. And don't tell me like legal man or something. I don't want to hear that.
No. I already know what superpower I want, and it's the power to be invisible.
Okay.
That is the number one. The kids get up at 6 and they're like rushing in. It'd be awesome to just, I'm not here. Go bother your mom. You know.
Okay.
That's mine.
That's a good.
Right.
I think that's the first time I hear it, and I've been doing this for like 30, 40 shows. Who wants to go next?
I'll go next. I love this question. I'm like a big comic book Marvel geek. So I would go teleportation just because of how much I travel and just being able to get to one place really, really quickly.
Kalsum, you stole mine.
Oh, I'm a night crawler girl. I would be night crawler and just teleport places. So yeah.
Good stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, in this day and age, you just want to
get places quick. Yeah.
pop up in like different countries immediately. No PCRs, no lineups, no uncertainty, no red countries, green countries.
No visas.
I think teleportation. Yeah. I think that's definitely a superpower, much needed these days.
Cool.
And raising capital fast. I think that's a great superpower to acquire.
That's something that I've been at. Waleed, I know you've been you're thinking really hard about this, so I can tell. But so what superpower are you gonna?
I love the question, and yes, I did go to a deep place, and I'm gonna pull out some philosophical stuff for you. But if I had a superpower, I wish I can project how I see people, like back to them, you know, in terms of the abilities of what they can possibly achieve, this universal power that each entrepreneur has and each incredible human being has around. I feel like there's a lot of people that are, including myself, that are just bogged down with our own like limitations and self-esteem. And I just feel like, you know, if you can beam some of that, this is how I see your potential, you know, people would just like break out and do incredible things. I really wish I had that power to just like mirror image deep inside how I see people so that they can get a shock of that, you know. And I think it would be, you know, better than any drug in the world. I think it would be fantastic.
You know,
you win. That's better than teleporting.
Very, I like it.
I think you already do that, Waleed. I mean, I've known Waleed too a very long time. I think I think that's something you already have.
Thank you, Hisham. One of my favorite things to do is talk to entrepreneurs because I see them and I see their passion. And I just want to be like, you know, it's fantastic. I get so energized from the people that I meet, and I wish they could see it through my eyes.
It is a good superpower, and I think the mirror aspect of it is sometimes good because it grounds a lot of I'm sure you speak to as many founders as I can, and some of them are super humble, and some of them are out there. So, a good superpower. Well, we're coming to the part where we're wrapping up the show. Would anybody like to add anything before we?
Wait. I want your superpower and Khaldun.
My superpower?
Yeah, Khaldun said he was gonna teleport, but he's got to come up with another one. Yeah, and I want to hear
you're putting
yours.
me on the spot here. Abe, you go first.
Yeah.
Well, so funny enough, I think you guys are my 40th or 42nd episode, and nobody has asked me for my superpower. Or actually, I never say a superpower because I always pick a superhero, but mine is more of a super villain. Because I don't know why I've been going through a villain phase. Even figurines, I have like more villains than actual heroes. I don't know why. And honestly, it's not like I mean to buy them, but I actually like a very super cool low key villain called the Mad Hatter because he changes hats and his personality changes and all his powers change. And I'm a hat collector. If you've watched my show, I think every episode has a different hat on. So that's something that I'm a collector, and I have over 250 hats. So that's something that is kind of resonates with me. But I think it's the personality change, and people who's known me over the last 15 years have seen me even evolve, entrepreneur, investor, doing this, then doing this. Abe's in the call center, Abe's in the business, Abe's in blah blah blah. So that's a part of me. So that's my superhero power, I think. So, and Khaldoon, you're not getting off the hook. We need something from you.
I guess not. I guess not. I guess after teleportation, it would be being able to slow time down a bit.
Okay.
I think we live such crazy, busy lives where we don't have enough time to reflect on our past, on our actions, our decisions, spend more time with family and friends. So definitely have more hours in the day, or at least have 24 hours, but they just run a little slower.
Awesome one. Honestly, if I look at, don't let the beard fool you. It's just time has gone really, really fast on us. So
Yeah.
Anybody else want to add anything? Well, fantastic, guys. It was lovely having all of you. By the way, we do have a hashtag called hashtag Real Talk No Nonsense. And until next time, take care. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having us, Abe.
Thank you, everyone.